All right, hello everyone. Welcome to oops. Laura has fallen off, but she'll come back again, I'm sure, soon. Anyway, welcome to Morbid Symptoms. I'm your host, Tara Van Dyke, and hopefully Laura Jones pops up again. I just saw her before oh, there she is. Good. That's always nice. Let me put her on. Hey, Laura.
Hiya.
How you doing?
Have audio. I'm all right. I couldn't find my little pink book that had my notes in it, so I have no notes. But that's okay.
We don't need notes.
I'm really angry now. So that frame of mind go into this.
Okay, so let's see if our can you hear me well?
Yeah, am I okay? Is it
crackly? Let's see if we're gonna have crackle or not. Uh-oh.
Do we have a crackle? Is there a crackle?
Testing. Whoa.
Testing. Is it okay? Is it good?
I don't know, maybe I just hear scratching or something.
It's not good. No. Okay, I'm gonna try on my laptop.
Okay.
I'm gonna leave and I'm gonna come back. Hang on, sorry.
Okay, that's fine. I'll just start and then you pop up. All right. Well, hi. Laura's gonna switch to her laptop. I am going to get rid of this banner since we've clearly started. Hide. There we go. All right. So, welcome. This is the Morbid Symptoms, and today we're going to be doing talking about some of arguably the morbid symptoms of contemporary feminism. One quite specific. It has to do with basically we have this phrase with the let's see how to begin. When October 7th happened, we realized a lot of people in the so-called gender critical movement or TERFs apparently were rabid Zionists or believed everything that they saw on TV about Israel. And so we came up with, I can't remember who it was, but there was a group of us who were commiserating like, why are all these people saying these things? And we came up with the term PERF, for Palestinian excluding radical feminists, because it seemed that when it came to Palestinian women in particular, Arab women in general in the region, apparently all the feminism and all the reason and all the logic just kind of flew out the window. And so we're going to, so that of course is a, kind of as a morbid symptom of contemporary feminism, in particular Western feminism, which seems to go hand in glove with Western imperialism, I think almost all the time. Laura, you're muted. We're going to see if Laura's, what's going on here.
Yeah, I was muting myself because I don't trust my audio.
Let's see. Testing.
Ruby.
We don't like Ruby. No. Okay, it's working. It's very good.
Working? Is it good?
Very good. Cool. We are good to go. Fantastico. Anyway, so we're going to do two things tonight. One quite fairly specific that Laura Jones is going to take the lead on about a member of the gender critical unit movement who got very upset about a fairly benign tweet and has gone off trying to get this woman canceled, if not deported. And it's just, kind of this nastiness, which is kind of an example of what we come to.
He's not. He was being very gracious, Tara. Remember, he doesn't want to get her deported.
Okay. Well, yes. So we're going to talk about that.
Point. He was like, "Hey, just to be clear, guys, I'm only
just
saying
to be clear, I'm trying to get her fired, but only deported if she supports a prescribed institution." It's like,
oh, that's right. Oh, yeah, no, sorry. There was a qualification.
Yeah, there was a caveat. So again, we have fun insight. So this is kind of a niche, might be a bit of a niche jargon for you people. If you're familiar with TERFs, then you understand PERF, which is basically Palestinian excluding radical feminists or Zio feminists, or people who talk like are on the Mossad payroll or on a Hasbara drip or something, and continue to and act as bad, if not worse, than TRAs, so trans right activists. So I have a thing that TRAs have nothing on ZRAs, which is the shorthand for Zionist rights activists. Anyway, so lots of ins and outs and what have you. So Laura's going to take the lead on that, and then we'll have a bit of a break, and then we'll come back and we're going to get into my the one I'm going to be driving on, which is patriarchy like an ideological fantasy for feminism? Is it kind of a sublime object that holds everything together? And the reason why is I'm trying to think through why, if you critique patriarchy at all as a concept in terms of its analytical or theoretical value, the feminists lose their mind typically. So it kind of piques my interest, like, well, why is that? So, so we're going to do the perf and how TRAs have nothing on ZRAs. Then we'll take a bit of a break, and then we'll come back and we'll do a bit more of a speculative question about how important is patriarchy to feminism? Can feminists let patriarchy go when and if it's time to? And I think it's probably already past time to. But I'm going to hand over the reins to Laura, and I'll put up the tweet. Oh, here we go. Here we have the perf, and I'm not going to say who, but one of our tags, TERFs Against Genocide, was good at the AI, and so she made some of these for us. And so this is kind of our perf sample. And so she's very lovely and nice and very caring, except for there's a big blind spot when it comes to anything to do with Israel and Zionism and Palestinian women. And here on the bottom is our friend who was trying to get well, it'll come clear. Go ahead, Laura, take over.
Well, so there's been a little,
and I have the tweet. I have the tweet. If you want me to put that on screen, I can put that on screen.
Yeah, put up the tweet, because the cheek, the absolute cheek of this guy. Yeah. Okay.
Do you want me to read it, or can you see it?
So yeah, in response to some very unpleasant accusations of what people just calling him out on is absolute nonsense. Just be like, what are you talking about? That's nonsense. I want to clarify something. I'm only calling for Raquel to be sacked, not deported, unless we find she's expressed support for a prescribed terrorist organization, in which case she should be deported. And yeah, I forgot that Raquel is actually from the Dominican Republic, is it? So that's
I don't know. And I want to say right off the bat that Raquel has I have not been in communication with her. We decided to do this on our own. She did not ask us to do this or anything like that. But it's the public domain of Twitter.
Do you think
she has a reputation for being a bit of a dick, to put it well?
Do you think that she will thank us for this? Because maybe, okay, well, we've drawn attention
to
it.
I think caveat that she has no. Yeah, this is totally of our doing.
The point is, she's on their radar, as are other women on the left that have been, critical of the gender stuff. And it's obviously a pattern that has emerged that is going to continue to be an issue within these organizations and for women who are organizing around, women's issues. So it's something that does need to be addressed. It's not about Raquel, although
it's the principle of it. It's the principle, and he's a repeat offender. So,
yeah, she's getting this because she's been outspoken, but also, so look back on her history, and I forgot actually that Raquel was instrumental in me getting cancelled for the first time, because it was a conversation that I had with a supposedly left-wing friend who gave me my moniker of being a formerly decent socialist, and it was it was kind of early on in all this nonsense, and it was talking about the problem in academia, and I talked about her, and I brought up is it Lisa Cuff? I don't know how you pronounce her name. She's the one in Edinburgh that got nearly expelled for saying that only women have uteruses in her tutorial group. And then, of course, James Esses. And he just basically sent me some trans rights articles saying how this was just nonsense and these people were horrible transphobes, and was like, look, there you go, Laura, that's, clearly you're wrong, and you've been going down an alt-right rabbit hole, and they've been filling your head full of anti-trans stuff. So she, it had an impact, obviously, that case. But yeah, so and she was a bit of a darling of the GC people for a while for having taken a brave stance, and you know, when she was young and in a new country and all that, like it took a lot. And then more recently she's written a series of like extremely sensible, just you know, stating facts, no polemic, no, you know, emotional arguments at all in her stuff. It's just like, you know, look at this issue. So one about ICC prosecutions, another one about the Pope being worried about the, you know, wiping out all the Christians in Gaza. You know, like a video about a woman talking about what it's like living in a permanent camp where you don't have any privacy or hygiene, or you know, and you're having to try to look after your family, keep them alive, etc. And you're just like, right, okay, so this is the horrible gun-toting, Hamas-supporting, terrorist loving, like, you know, very kind of sensible, just come on, it's horrific what's happening stuff. But that's why they're going after her, because she is writing this very sensible stuff.
They can't tolerate any even moderate consideration or treatment of Palestinians as human, or as, you know, as they can't see them as the victim or the on the other side of this. And what gets me is this is what Ruby is up in arms about. So Khaleesi wrote, she has a pretty big account. She wrote, Hamas is releasing 33 Israelis and Israel's releasing 1,000 Palestinians. This makes it clear who really held the hostages. And we know that Palestinians there's probably like about 10,000 Palestinians being held in this indefinite detention because they have no rights. Israel affords them no rights, even though they control everything in that area. And so, you know, and so she just said, bring them home. Yeah. And Ruby exclaims, Jesus, actual Christ. Philia Charity, this is your spokeswoman. She represents your organization. I mean,
this is the TRA
Ruby would be just as up in arms about the bloodthirst and bloodlust and just genocidal glee of people when the shoe was on the other foot. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, it's all very familiar. The knee-jerk reaction, the jumping to trying to get somebody expelled from an organization. You know, this is straight out the TRA handbook, the way that these people behave, and the fact that she went through all of this before, just a few years ago. And now what you've got again is a small minority of extremists who are trying to push their worldview on people, and it's the same. It's like you've got extremists, because if you look at the comments, the people that are calling for Raquel to be sorry, so this is what's going on. We probably update people. A few, just like this twat and a couple of other, you know, Israel supporting TERFs have come on to support him. And like, look, you know, but not a lot, to be honest. They've not got a lot of support. As far as I know, Philia has not responded to this in a statement or anything, which maybe that's good. Yeah, maybe don't.
They shouldn't. They shouldn't give it any fire, or just
because it's not a huge. There was a woman underneath there that had a lot of likes on a comment saying, yeah, she's an outrage, and also cancel this other woman because she likes Black Lives Matter too much or something. But if you look at them, if you look at them, they've got Yam Israel, Chai, you know, all over their profiles. They're like, they post nothing but, and these are a handful of extremists who have managed to make themselves seem more representative than they are. And that's exactly the point that Raquel made in one of her articles, where she's like, look, the public support for Israel is at an all-time low. People don't support this genocide. People are overwhelmingly in favor of a ceasefire. They think Israel's reaction has been, and you know, this is just an Ipsos survey that she's quoting from. She's not making this up. And they know that, and they're feeling very threatened, and they want to desperately tie Israel's project to feminism, and I'm hopeful that it's being less successful than they want it to be. but yeah, certainly I can imagine Filia. I know that they haven't spoken up on the Palestine issue, but I mean, I guess maybe the organizers of Filia are thinking like, well, are we more likely to end a genocide or make real gains in the UK to, you know, win back single-sex services, etc. So maybe that's, you know, like they're like, what is this network or this organization for? Because I mean, at the end of the day, it's a network that they're trying to create of practical organizations that are doing practical work to, you know, to make women's lives better, and that's kind of what the whole essence of Filia is. And so they are trying to tread this careful line that is really uncomfortable for a lot of us, especially given that they're more than happy to comment about some, you know, like other countries and, you know.
Oh, the Taliban.
Well,
and
yeah,
they'll jump
yes,
all over.
Exactly.
I mean,
and this is there is a split, you know, happening in what do you want to call it, Western feminism, actual feminism, you know, yeah, like I think we've seen a lot of this. So Raquel, for example, was originally cancelled and targeted by all these blue hairs at Bristol for chairing a meeting with Women's Place UK, which is all about getting men out of women's prisons, and also about
they have the radical stance that men aren't women. That's
yeah.
They have the radical stance that men are women, and we have the radical stance that genocidal campaigns are bad, ethnic cleansing bad, bombing children and the elderly and women and non-combatant men and all this stuff, especially, you know, like fish in a barrel is bad. These radical positions we hold, Laura.
Well, and this is the thing, right? I can accept. So I wouldn't want to go for a drink with these people. I wouldn't want them anywhere near me or anyone I cared about. I have no respect for them, but I'm not out there calling for these Israel supporters to be banned and put on lists and removed from all, you know, conferences or whatever. At the point where I feel that what they're doing is actually making it, you know, this is the problem with trans rights activists. No one had a problem with the pronouns. No one had a problem. They were like, we were all a bit like, okay, this is a thing now. But no one had an issue with it until it actually started to get in the way of actually doing stuff. It got in the way of people being able to work together and make decisions that were not completely insane in terms of how we should move forward. And that's why it became a threat. And these people become a threat when they make it hard to actually do the job that we're supposed to do. And in like the case of Women's Place UK, for example, that is representing prisoners, women prisoners, female prisoners. And that includes all female prisoners, right? So they made a statement a while back and they got, when I say cancelled, obviously they haven't been cancelled, but you know that the certain sectors of this, you know, right-wing kind of leaning turfdom cancelled them because they didn't want Kelly J. Keane speaking at their event after she basically promoted the race riots. And they made a very, very sensible statement to that effect and said, well, look, we are representing all sorts of people and people aren't going to want to be involved with someone who's got a hate campaign against Muslims. Funnily enough, that woman, Serena Billy Bragg, I like her. I still follow her. She's one of the only ones I do follow because she's funny and and insightful. But she's like, feminism is for all women, like all in capitals, as in like all women, including middle-class white women who've never been to prison but have a real fucking issue with immigrants. Not, you know, anyone that isn't white that might be in prison also, you know, that might want to speak up or be a part of a movement and feels like they can't because, you know, it's already terrifying to speak up on, or what has been on this issue.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. Like, what does this actually mean that feminism means all women? Because to me, what that would mean is that if there's an issue and you're focused on whether it be, women in prison or child safeguarding or whatever it is, then if that's the issue that you're focusing on, then all the other stuff should be pushed to the side while you're focusing on that issue. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't do that, but they expect everybody else to do it. So it's like, for example, if the Palestinian thing, it's like, so if you're against violence against women, and then you see a state that's going out of its way and doing nothing to prevent large-scale slaughter of women and children, and you don't say anything, or you actually are like, well, they're human shields, or like, well, the Hamas or whatever it is.
I know.
It's all women.
Yeah, I'm contradicting myself in a sense, because it's like, part of me thinks it's a sensible position to have, to be like, look, we're not going to take a position on this because that's not the area that we're working in. And in order to be able to work on this, we need to, so there's that kind of like, there's that, but then there's also like, the point needs to be made that it's not an extreme position. But then also, you're right, the point needs to be made that the position that's been taken hasn't been, there has been no position taken on the slaughter of women and children.
No, my only point is, if you're going to say it's for all women, then you should also not be hypocritical about that. And you could be, it's entirely possible to focus on how Israel-Palestine affects women and children without taking, it's a bit of a threading the needle, without taking a political stance on, whether you are for the 1 or 2 state solution or everything like that, but anyway, yeah, I just find it a bit, they're just a bit too precious for me. But yeah, I've never tried to, cancel anybody or get somebody fired or, deported or anything like that. And I just say what I think in my comment and make my point, but I'm not out to get anybody. So yeah, which you would think would be like where most people would be, but we've since long past that. It seems to be like the flex now, just to
I think there's sidestepping the issue and going, okay, I'm prepared to work with Zionists because we're interested in getting women out of, or getting men out of this prison. And do I need to have the same position on Israel-Palestine as somebody who's standing next to me holding a banner, or I don't know, talking to the press with me on that issue, whatever, you're working together. But then there's also this, like, you don't find there's no middle ground. There's this middle ground that they're all determined that you can find. And currently the middle ground is that Hamas are terrible rapists and Israel has a right to defend. The middle ground for these women is not what the middle ground is for the vast majority of the public in the UK. They're for some reason, and well, we know why. That stupid tweet from that guy. I don't know if you were going to talk about that later, maybe, with that stupid Marxist who's talking about how we women didn't see the shift to the right coming, and we should have dealt with that sooner. No.
Oh well, that's another. We'll do a bad male Marxists. Believe you me.
Yeah.
The Marxists in general, but especially the men, have not been shrouding themselves in glory. I can tell you that much. We'll get to you guys.
They're all getting a medal now for saying the same shit that we've been saying for the last 10 years. And now finally the wind is blowing slightly in the other direction, and they're getting all the plaudits for like, hey, identity politics is a bad thing.
Why are you guys engaging in it like it was a choice?
Yeah, but so you remember this? If I leave this, if I make this small, am I going to disappear? I probably will. See, this is the problem with being on my laptop. Where did I put my phone? Right. When I tweeted ages ago, what the hell is wrong with GC people? You've been moaning about the mutilation of children for the last 10 years, but look what's going on in Gaza. You don't care. Something to that extent. And this woman, Shropshire Wendy TERF, responded to me with this like very, very well thought out, very long message. Okay, I'll bite, she says. Well, hang on, I'll find what I wrote. Where are the GCs that have spent years saying they're against the mutilation of children, sneering at student protesters and crying about flags? Shame on every single one of them. I've lost count of the children I've watched taking their last breath on this screen. And of course, the same gaslighting, TRA, bullying nonsense that I remember from getting cancelled by those assholes. Somebody came on and was like, "You watch children dying on video? Like, you big
like, what's wrong with you?"
Like, yeah. But yeah, so she wrote like this huge, big, like, okay, I'll bite. A belief in the immutability of sex is held by many, I'd guess an unproven majority of the world. This belief, the immutability of sex, is held by Putin and Eastern leaders, as well as the modern majority of Westerners. This belief, the immutability of sex, it's not patronizing in the slightest, is it? Is held by those in wars on both sides. In all war, conflict, past, present, and future, that belief will hold, for it is the truth. In all wars, fortunes are made and lost, inhumane cruelty given free rein, and the majority of those harmed are the powerless on all sides. In all wars, injustice is prevalent and excused on all sides. To equate those holding the belief in an immutable nature of sex as women who must always take the side you have decided should be taken is a futile exercise, for that belief is the truth and widespread, held by all sides, all populations, all in peace and war and conflict. Shared belief in the truth of the immutability of sex does not and cannot imply a united belief or passion in any other viewpoint. So just because you don't believe that sex is, there are many who hold in the truth of the immutability of sex who weep for the girls of the October 7th massacre. There are many who hold in the truth of the immutability of sex who weep for the children of Gaza. There are many who hold in the truth of the immutability of sex who cannot bear injustice that humans from time to time have always inflicted on each other and always will do, etc., etc. And that got liked by everyone, including,
well, of course, because it absolves them.
Well, you could still see what people who liked stuff back then. So J.K. Rowling liked that. She thought that was great. And she is, Scotland is the center of the TERF universe. J.K. Rowling is the undisputed queen of TERFdom. Sorry, Kelly. But so there it is, right? So, but I've been tweeting this at every single bloody perf that I come across, because I'm like, whoa, guys, just because you believe that sex is real doesn't mean that you're gonna believe any side of any conflict. Why should feminists care about this? Why should feminists care about that? These people are, yeah. But I mean, this was back in, oh God, no, that was in May. There's no excuse for it. But when Philia,
we'll talk about never again. It's just, you could say like, well, war's hell, and there's different sides, and it's like, okay, she's trying to put herself as the empire.
What about the girls of the October 7th massacre? What the fuck are they talking about?
Yeah. Well, largely the Israel killed.
Yeah.
Most of the civilians that died on that day were killed by Israelis, IDF people, because it was quite clear that the goal of taking hostages is not to kill them. You want to keep them alive because you want to exchange for all the people that Israel is holding.
But you see how the arguments just like, so once an argument is completely dismantled and they can't even pretend to believe it anymore, they just sort of like the 40 beheaded babies thing just sort of slipped. They stopped mentioning it. The idea that these Palestinians are men are more likely to rape or are potential mass rapists is one that is stuck. It doesn't seem to matter how much or how little evidence or how much evidence there is that it was a hoax, this mass rape on October 7th thing, which seems believable. And like, I think a lot of people were suckered in by that, just because they have maybe a bit of a feminist analysis and they're like, yeah, that's a thing that would happen, like that's believable. But when you actually look into it, it's like, well, actually, no, it's not credible in the slightest. And you look at
the thing is, people's ideological beliefs or theological beliefs are resistant to facts. That's how you can detect them, because it seems like it also seems like the more the facts stack up against them, the tightly more held people tend to hold on to them if they're significant. And I can imagine if you went all in on this, it'd be hard for you to try to back out now. But it's amazing to me, like you said, even now, people holding on to this really, they sound like an IDF spokesperson or something. Is that you would think that even just for to be strategic for self-preservation, they'd ease up on a bit, because I keep on saying, like, the truth is going to come out, or it's going to become more, it's going to become harder and harder to disprove, and this stink is going to be hard for you to wash off once we realize it's not just 30,000 people, but what, 200,000-300,000? And we know all the carnage, and you're going to be like, what? Hamas is a building, Hamas is a hospital, Hamas is a child, Hamas is a pregnant lady, Hamas. And even if it is, it's this ridiculousness, because it's this hypocrisy, because either they're stupid or they pretend to be. But there's this whole thing about, I know international law doesn't matter anymore, but there's certain rules of war that were established by the fantastic West that for whatever reason don't apply to Israel, or only apply to people that the United States wants them to apply to. And so it's like, you can't just go and kill everybody when you're attacked. Even if there wasn't the colonial, even though there wasn't the occupy thing, what they did is illegal and genocide. And raises to the possibility of plausible genocide, which is why the court did not throw out the South African case, and I think they want to pretend like how that doesn't. No, if it's war, you can just, it's all good. It's like, really? Is this going to apply to you? The people that have been sending the weapons and cheering this on, does that apply to you? Can they do anything they want to you?
And I think once again, it's like, just completely contradict myself from earlier. Like, I still hold that it's true that when you're doing something on a small scale, like, like if you're talking about community organizing, you really cannot go around demanding to know whether somebody's a Zionist if they want help. Like,
no, and I'm not saying that.
No, I know, but there does come a level of consciousness where, like, if you are then representing yourself, you've got a big platform, there is a responsibility, isn't there? And then also, if you've got followers or people that are, a lot of the time working for these groups, and I'm not talking about Philia here, but like all the different groups you've got, these are tensions that if you don't address them, they are going to continue to be problems further down the line. And that is something that we've all learned from the trans rights activist nonsense. It's like, okay, fine, you can cancel us because we've got the wrong views, and it makes it easier then because these people are unhappy with us, and you want to appease them by getting rid of us. What happens the next time they decide that you're not, au fait with like whatever new gender there is? And it's the same now with these people. Okay, right, well, you're not quite racist enough for these people, or you're a Hamas supporter apparently, so you're gone. But who next? Like, so you and also that when you try to start solving the problems, like the grooming that goes on, the exploitation of women, that you very quickly encounter that you find that the root causes of these things are huge and structural and systematic, and it's you do actually have to start addressing those things. So like, you can't address the exploitation issue without addressing housing. So in a way, I do think that in order to be a feminist, you need to think about these things, because how are you going to improve life for women? I completely
and it's the case, I mean, I know there's people who have not, because that's why we have, who knows how many chat groups there are on X, but the reason why we form these little, chat groups for people who would be hesitant. So there's people who are already on X who are anonymous because they didn't want to risk losing their livelihoods or being, cast out of decent society for, the claim that men can't be women. And it was the same thing they felt, about being critical or being against what was going on in Israel, Palestine. And so they had to make a decision. So if my account is all about turf stuff and women's rights, do I want to, get into that or not? And people have to make up their own mind. That's different. That's a different thing. But yeah, it's just difficult. So it'd be one thing if I was working with somebody and they were constantly like, having, bringing it into the space all the time, how they're standing with Israel and, and all this stuff. Yeah, I would have a hard time not saying something about that. But if you have like a time and place, like, for this organization or for this network or whatever, this is our focus on. And you expect people not to bring in all the shit that distracts from the goal at hand or to take it to the side. Yeah. And then people have to decide if they can deal with it or not,
Yeah. I mean,
because
I think this is part of the issue with this movement, such as it is, right? I think women's place have a sensible position on this because they're engaged in practical work. And I think part of the reason that Philly have been sensible on this is because they've been engaged in practical work. And that, sorry, this stupid dog. Yeah, and like it's almost okay. So it almost feels like basically a lot of these middle class women have moved on, so they're not maybe as concerned with single sex spaces anymore. That's boring to them now. But we didn't win that fight. All that's happened is that a certain middle class discourse has started to shift a bit. So now you're feeling like, oh, that's boring, and I want to talk about other things, like how there's too many Muslims. It's like, no, hang on, we've not actually dealt with the single sex services thing. There are still men in women's prisons, which is why those awesome women, some of whom may be Zionists, do you know what I mean? We're protesting in front of women's prisons, which is like, we all need to support that. But like when Philia happened, I looked it up in Glasgow when they had their Philia conference in Glasgow. That was the 13th of October, I think, or something that it started. So it was a week after. I hadn't realized that. So it was, and I remember dreading it. I remember because, remember the reactions, instant, let's bomb them to smithereens, like, all the rest of it. And
animals.
So nobody mentioned it. It was kind of don't mention the war.
Yeah, don't ask, don't tell.
There was a couple of kiffies. But the funny thing is, when we arrived, right, this twat Tom Harlow, who threatened to sue me at one point. I'm like, sue me, Tom, for saying that he helped to cover up for rapist. Anyway, but he turned up with his army of like teenage misfits to yell at the women that were going into Philia, and it kind of backfired because there were a lot of like women there that were like, FGM campaigners and stuff, so it like made them look kind of bad. But they were all singing songs, calling us bigots, and like there's all these like middle-aged TERFs just like dancing back at them and stuff. But then the second day, so the trans rights activists didn't turn up. But there was this very strange woman that like she was wearing a yarmulke. Is that a thing? Is that not a guy thing? Do women wear yarmulkes?
I thought it was just a guy thing, but
I thought it was, So I was like, is this like a queer Jewish woman who's come to Philia? Like, anyway, she was wandering around, and she was standing outside at one point having a cigarette, and the Palestine demo went past, and she turns to the bouncers and starts going, oh, look, there they are. There's those people that want to kill all the Jews. Like within earshot of like, just like an Asian family with small children that were walking past. And I'm like, and the bouncer sort of gave me this like look like, can we not go there kind of thing. But it's just the same trans rights activist nonsense. What, like the same as we're killing trans people in here with literal violence by having very sensible conversations about sex-based rights. Like these people want to kill all the Jews, do they? Like what on earth? But yeah, so we can't. Yeah, I don't know how they've influenced. I mean, Posey Parker has a lot to do with it, I think, how they've managed to infiltrate so heavily. But yeah, the Hasbara propaganda is very powerful. It's always been really powerful, that kind of stuff. They used it as an excuse to go into Afghanistan. Look how terribly these people treat their women.
Well, and that's the thing about the morbid symptom aspect of feminism, not just that there's, I mean, there, you know, we're all human, we're all capable of hypocrisy, obviously. And I don't know if you would think that, or maybe not, I'm sure we all have blind spots, but it's just like, it was so obvious from about a couple of weeks into this that they're acting exactly about the thing that all the stuff they complained about on the other side, they're now doing in response to people who aren't, you know, aren't all like, I stand with Israel no matter what, blah, you know. Or you get the thing like, why do you care? Why do you care about that? It's like, well, first of all, I'm a human. Second of all, you know, not that you have to have lived there, but I did work there for 2 years, way back when, during the second Intifada, actually. I'm an American, and so nobody is responsible for Israel as much as my country is. Historically, the UK, but like, you know, aggregately. So it's like, I have very much, you know, will continue to say that, you know, what I call it is it's a lunatic timeshare protection racket imperial outpost colony, because that's what it is. Now, people there feel all kinds of things about it, but it's just like, it's what it is.
And a system made up of rapists who have strong connections and like figures in authority that will cover up and excuse everything they do, and a culture that excuses it. And with all this chat of, for example, like the grooming gangs and that before, when these women, well, maybe they don't see the images, although how these people manage to live in a silo bubble they're in denial. But when you see pictures of Israeli soldiers taking women away or you know, arresting a 6-year-old girl, what the hell do they think is happening there? Do you know what I mean? Like,
well, especially because there's no consequence for it. They can do whatever they want, and they do. Of course they do. I don't know if they think there's some sort of special caste or something, but it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. Or the thing about, oh, well, you know, that one woman, that feminist for the lesbian for genocide, whatever she was, she's also, anyway, she was all about, oh, nothing more ridiculous than queers for Palestine. I'm like, okay, yeah, we have issue with the queer word. But the thing is, it's like, who has killed more LGB, we'll even throw the T in there, people in Gaza? I can tell you it's not Palestinians. I know exactly who it is. And I also know they blackmail them.
And who killed more women in Afghanistan?
Yeah. Well, and who's killed more women in Gaza?
Yeah.
And it's like, and like you said, and just this thing is like, they're more concerned about covering than they are about just the most nastiest, slaughter, intentional. And if you're concerned about a group's population, you want to kill the kids and the moms. You totally do. And if you listen to what they say and what they do, they don't hide it. But yet we're told by our leaders and the so-called mainstream media and the right media that, oh, no, it's, you know, it's all defense and they're this and that and this and that. I mean, it's just the most craziest thing. And I can see if all these people had as like the regular diet of like BBC or in you know, MSNBC or the Wall Street Journal or the Times London, whatever, and you really just had no thing, that I could see, you know, that it would be really difficult for you to consider the fact that maybe Israel is not the good guy in this, and certainly not unequivocally. Yeah, and then we'll get into the, you know, how it's the you know, the outpost for Western imperialism in the Middle East. It's why it exists. You know, the UK didn't sign it over, didn't say, oh yeah, you can have a colony in Palestine out of the goodness of their heart. People are stupid, but I also can be stupid. But it's just, the thing is that they know how they can't make the connection between, okay, we've been gaslit and bullshit and lied to about gender ideology from all these sources for all this time, but these same sources are 100% on task when it comes to the Middle East.
And the whole grooming gang narrative, I mean, it's no coincidence that two of the people at the center of that whole media storm, like a month ago or whatever, are just Israeli shells agents, possibly, like Tommy Robinson and Posey Parker, if that's even their real names, which is not. Like, you know,
yeah, who knows?
It feeds into that, because if you justify this stuff and to believe that every horrible image that you see is a Pallywood production,
human shields.
Yeah, like you need to dehumanize these. You know, you need to believe, and so any story that feeds into that, you know, rather than saying, like, you know, where you have horrible vulnerability and war and poverty, etc., women are vulnerable to these kinds of attacks. No, it's Muslims. It's where the Muslims are. That's where these things happen. It's all part and parcel, isn't it?
Yeah, it seems like it. But anyway, so I'll put this up because I don't know. It seems that maybe this is blown over. Maybe Ruby's witch hunt campaign was not successful. That would be good. But if people want to support her, and here's the thing: is that this was in one of my tag Turfs Against Genocide, and which Raquel is not a part of, not because we exclude her, but just the way it is. I don't know why. But someone posted this in here. It says, please contact Philia. This is a forum or a DM or however, and tell them to support Raquel Rosario Sanchez and not counsel her for caring about Palestinian women. Raquel tweeted, bring them home, about the Palestinian prisoners, and UK Zio squad are out to have her kicked out of Philia, the bastards. And that is from a member of our tag, the tag group, who will go anonymous. But if people want to do that, I'm sure, because I don't know if he's the flames are still fanning on this or not.
Yeah, and to just remember that it's a small minority of extremists who are not representative, but that have, you know, got people running scared, as we have seen before with the trans rights activists. So you need to show these people solidarity. And
stand up to the bullies.
Yeah, that's all it is.
You can, if you can.
Not give, absolutely.
Yeah. So Ruby, keep my eye on you, buddy.
But the cheek of this dude.
I know. I mean, just over that, bring them home.
Can you please kick this woman out for not being sufficiently pro-genocide? No, get out of our feminism.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, how slim pickings are there? I mean, he must be, maybe that's what he does, is he goes through everybody's accounts looking for, you know, anything you can possibly tout as wrong thinking. That's the best you can come up with. Must be getting to the end of this train, I'd hope. You know? But it's also a learning curve, I think, for organizations to figure out how to deal with this stuff, you know, and not just panic and reflex and, you know, and put out, you know, and kind of throw people under the bus who have not broken any rules besides saying something that somebody took an issue with. You know, it's like, yeah, well, welcome to life. You know, if I try to get everybody fired who said something I didn't like, that's the only thing I'd be busy doing. You know?
And we need to move away from this nonsense, which is another TRA thing of seeing canceling people online as a form of political practice. Like, oh, look at me! I got a woman, you know, kicked out of the group today. Like, it's not doing stuff.
No, I
but
mean,
yeah, women need to show each other a bit more. Like maybe as a side story, there, Yvonne Ridley got this pile on. I don't know if you were aware of this a while back. So Yvonne Ridley was women's convener, or whatever they called it, for the Alpha Party, and at the time when, right, so like the UN had appointed a dude to some position, like a women's position, you know, women's ambassador for something or other, whatever. And everyone was angry about that. And Yvonne Ridley tweeted a thing saying, "This is an outrage. Obviously, this man shouldn't be in a woman's position." But in the tweet she said something along the lines of someone that used to be a man or something like that. Used the wrong language, right? I mean, the message that she was like conveying was correct, but she said the wrong words, and she got this huge pile on, including from people that were like long-standing kind of colleagues and friends of hers who were using it for their own political like reasons. And this is post the conference where some feminist voices in the party had stood up and echoed the Hasbara rape hoax propaganda. And so there was like a bit of that tension bubbling, you know, under the surface, but mostly I think it was like personal political stuff. But yeah, so she got this huge pile on. She instantly apologized. She's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. You know,
blood in the water.
You know, like wrong language, very insensitively, blah, blah, blah." And they just kept coming for her, and it was huge. And there was hundreds of people liking and sharing all these comments on it. And in the end, there was like very delicately, temporarily stood down from her position as women's convener, but not resigned, not was forced out, but had to, you know, took a step back, I guess, to re-educate herself on the language that you're allowed to use. But I was a bit messed up. It's like, okay, this woman's, you know, like a decades-long anti-war, you know, like journalist who's been everywhere, you know, has all this insight. Turfing wasn't her main thing. You know, she hasn't spent the last 10 years arguing about guys that think they're women online. She has better things to do with her time. And those things are the reason that we'd appointed her our women's convener. But you know, these step in and they go like, well, like, you know, this is the most important thing in feminism and she got it wrong, therefore she's not relevant. Well, maybe women care about other stuff and maybe it is related for them, you know. And for her, I don't know, maybe she didn't say the right things about the Taliban, maybe she said the wrong things about Gaza. But it all happened around the same time, and you know, like November, whatever, last, so there's just a lot of this nonsense going on, and I think a bit of solidarity between women still would be nice. It would be
a bit of grace as well, because we all messed up. We all, you know, like I said, excuse the language, but everybody's shit stinks. Everybody says wrong things. We're not perfect, and I would say that most of you, you know, if you feel like you should apologize, then apologize. But if you don't feel like it, then you should. I mean, because then it's like blood in the water. It's never going to be enough. And I don't know when we got in this thing where there's all these non-Protestant Puritans, you know, everybody trying to, I don't know, looking for somebody to put up the flagpole. It's like, okay, if somebody really deserves it, that's one thing, but calm the frick down. I know there's a couple of times, this is, I mean, not compared to what happened to that lady or to Raquel or others, but there's sometimes when I'll use the word gender, not meaning gender ID, but just as a synonym for sex, because, you know, I am an American, and it's quite clear that I'm using it as a synonym for sex, you know, so relations, you know, gender relations or whatever, and someone inevitably will comment, I'm assuming you're American, so I can let it go. Or I can excuse the use of gender instead of sex. I'm like, fuck off, you know. I'm like, you know what I mean?
Oh, thank you.
It's like, yeah, I'm aware of the baggage and whenever possible, but it's just like, you know, I'm like, come on. But it's just so sorry.
It is elitist as well, because it's like you need to be in a frame of mind where it's part of your culture to have a go at people about the kind of words they use all the time. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've seen this before, and you know, it's one thing that was true. Like a lot of this kind of this revulsion against left-wing academic feminists, like Jane Clare Jones, for example, who gets this whole thing of, what do they call them? the head
high
girls.
table, or the high table,
The
or
head,
the
yeah, like
girls,
we
head
know
girls,
everything better than you. We're more educated, so we're gonna talk down to you like normal, down to earth people, like Posey Parker, you know, like real salt of the earth types, like her, who just tell it like it is.
Coal miner's daughter.
But that is absolutely a thing. Like, you know, within middle class feminist circles, like I've been on Twitter spaces before where you've got like Amanda that locked up with men, so she was in prison and had to share spaces with this man, and she talks about it, but then she had these sort of kind of like maybe new to turfing kind of young academic kind of women that were going, oh, I don't like the language that you used about that, and oh, I'm not sure about this, and you know, we really don't help our movement by using these kinds of terms, you know. And it's like, shut up, she was locked in a cell with a dude, like, just listen.
Oh, but also it's like, it's one thing if you're like working together on a speech to give to like the prime minister or the UN or something, but if you're just talking, let people talk.
Let people, and don't,
you know,
let them develop, and just don't have everything be an excuse to cancel. I mean, I don't know where did they get this idea to start canceling?
There's nothing more important than your vocabulary. Yeah, I mean, who knows? But yeah, it's so anything else you want to say on this before we take a little bit of a break?
Well, Jen unfortunately never responded to our critique of her.
Oh, that's right. We didn't do an update. We did do, because we did. Yeah. No, the last, the first, the bad red fem takes, or bad feminist takes that Laura and I did was on the Red Fem podcast, when they were shared with us their cultural analysis. And she had been complaining that no one had said, no one has come up with a critique, that they just want to, say bad things or whatever. So Laura and I took the time to do a very thorough critique of their cultural analysis, and found it very lacking and wanting in various aspects. And so but she apparently, there hasn't been anything, which is fine. I wasn't expecting there to be, but she could have. Yeah, she could have.
A few people kind of poked her with it. I mean, I don't know. We took the time, but that's fine, Jane. That's fine. You don't want to.
No, it was just like, I'll bite. Careful what you ask for.
I was gonna listen to their next one, and then I don't know if this has anything to do with us, but it's now you have to pay to be a member to listen to their stuff, and it was £3. So I was like, nah. If you're giving your thoughts away for free, then fine. But I'm not. You're not getting my £3.
Told her to pay for that wisdom. Well, basically, the extent of their cultural analysis was these are the ideas we have floating around our mind about Pakistani rural culture.
Well, so obviously we're not.
Yeah.
But this is kind of part of the whole lack of solidarity thing. It's like, were we a movement? Were we ever a movement that we did all this stuff that together, and we were in the same places, thinking the same things, but maybe we never had any allegiances to each other in any way. Like all these people, like Raquel, okay, did she, do we owe her anything for what she put herself through in order that other women like wouldn't have to go through that? Do we actually owe each other anything for any of that? I don't know. But sorry.
Go ahead. No, say what you want to say.
It would be nice to afford people that, like, obviously we're not her target audience anymore. But that's what I find fascinating about her, is like, what is the target audience then? Because Posey Parker's not going to tune into your fake, Leninist fucking podcast. Like, who are you trying to attract with this stuff? People that are TERFs, but also kind of like the communist aesthetic. Like, who are these people? If you're not going to talk to us, then who are your peers?
Yeah.
Paul. Thank you, Paul. I'm glad it makes sense to someone.
Hey, it's the live stream, man. It's later. Yeah, well, I think it's also one of the things about online, maybe, is that, that maybe it's easier to throw someone under the bus attack somebody if you only know them, through you're only an ex-mutual or something, when you haven't seen them face to face, or you don't have that kind of long-term comradeship or whatever, of that kind of discipline. And to try to also, if you do, then you try to, as much as possible, keep disputes offline, not use the internet to adjudicate your intergroup or whatever problems. But
it's about the ideas. It's not personal.
Mm.
That's the main thing. Is none of it. It's not about personally attacking people. And that's exactly it. Have the conversation. You don't have the conversation, then these tensions continue to arise. So it's better to try to have it in a way that is civil and rational. And that's been our whole argument for the last decade.
Yeah. Interregnum. Yeah. All right. So let's see. So on that note, yeah, we should all, I think that I'll be glad when the quote unquote cancel culture is gone, and that people who don't like it when it was done to people they like can see that it's kind of like one of those things, that just, I don't know why he popped in my head, but Noam Chomsky did. Only because there was a time, I guess it's a long time ago now, but there was some neo-Nazi group that wanted to have a parade in some town that had a large Jewish population. And so there's all this uproar about they shouldn't be allowed to do it. And he was, I don't know if he was supporting the ACLU or something about, because basically saying, yeah, it's terrible. I obviously have nothing, I don't like what they're doing, but they have a right to do it. Under the First Amendment, they have a right to do it. And it's the idea that, if you only have values when it's easy, you're like, oh yeah, speech is great, until it's somebody's speech that you don't like, or it has that canceling's terrible unless it's someone I don't like being canceled, or I'm having fun with it, or I'm getting clicks or whatever. Then you're just kind of might want to think about that, and it's difficult. But yeah. All right. So on that note, we're going to take about 10 minutes? 10-minute break? Yeah? How you feeling? You feeling all right?
Yeah, fine.
Okay.
I hope some of that made sense, but you
don't
can
worry
edit
about
this
it. Yeah, the stream is one thing, and I can edit stuff. Yeah, because I also find myself talking around points sometimes. I'm listening to it later, and I'm like, what was I trying to?
I'm sure I've said enough words that you can stick them together into like.
Don't worry about it, Laura. Yeah. Anyway, so we're gonna take 10 minutes, and then when we come back, we're gonna switch gears, and let's see if I can find my little graphic here. Yeah. We're gonna get into why can't, a provocative title, why can feminism quit patriarchy? Is it time to, and why would it be so difficult? And I'm gonna take the lead on that, and Laura's gonna jump in if I start getting off the rails. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So we'll be back in 10 minutes.
Off the rails. Let's just go off the rails. I'll go
let's do it, man. So it's just thought, just thinking things through, trying to figure things out, trying to be, consistent.
What can they do? Cancel us again?
Yeah, they can try. Okay. So we'll be back in 10 minutes to take on this. And Laura, if you find your notebook and if there's some things you wanted to say that you didn't get to, we can certainly circle back to that.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. We'll be back in 10 minutes, people. Bye. 10 minutes. All right. Hello, everyone. We're back. I'm going to take off my banner. Can you hear me, Laura? Oh, is Laura frozen? Laura's frozen. Let's see. Oh, there you are. Are you back? Frozen again. Oh,
no,
okay.
I'm not frozen.
Oh, okay. All right. You can do a statue. It could just be, maybe it's the signal's a bit odd. Okay. So did you find your notes? Is there anything you want to add to what we were saying before? Are we gonna move on? We're moving on.
Okay. I have no idea where I put them.
It's all right. It's fine. Okay, so moving on to, can feminism quit patriarchy, and are they intertwined? Does feminism even make sense if they were to let go of this concept of, or the foe of patriarchy? And I'm going to because what I found is that whenever you want to poke on, okay, when we say patriarchy or smash the patriarchy or it's patriarchy, what exactly does that mean? And does it mean the same thing as it did 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago, et cetera, et cetera? Because I find that similar to, I think I always this reminds me of something that Adolf Reed Jr. says in response to Black politics or racial politics in the States. He says, everything has changed in Black politics except for the way it's talked about. And so oftentimes I think about this too, that in terms of sexual politics or relations between the sexes, and I'm focusing now on the quote unquote Western world. So I'm not talking about every single place. If the same can be said about feminism, and the kind of battle between the sexes, whatever you want to call it, if things have changed, or a lot of things have changed except for the way that it's generally understood. And as one example, you'll get this is a bit of a conversation I was having, and someone was I got a lot of people telling me what patriarchy was, or what, or does it, how do we know it actually exists? Because it's definitely a concept, it's definitely an idea that is central to feminist theory and politics. And so Midnight Mosaic said, well, patriarchy upholds sexist structures and continues to make things unequal. So in my mind, this implies that there's this thing called patriarchy, and it upholds sexist structures, and that's why things are unequal. And I would say that this doesn't really explain anything. And this is nothing, not to pick on Midnight Mosaic, but this is a common thing. And so I've just been kind of thinking about this, and I'm not the first person to think about it. I mean, Camille Paglia comes to mind. Other people have been kind of critical about, can we move on? Can we kind of, isn't patriarchy just another word for society? What's the difference between patriarchy, political economy, society? What are we talking about here? And what started me off thinking about this again is this article. I saw this in the feed, was it a week ago? And one of the professors, or one of the who wrote this article, posted it. And it says, the misandry myth, an inaccurate stereotype about feminist attitudes towards men. And there's all this sling of people. And basically what this study did is I think they combined 6 different studies of measuring people's attitudes towards men. And what they found was no considerable difference between feminist attitudes towards men, negative attitudes towards men, or people who say they're not feminists. So if you have feminists and men and women who aren't feminists, they basically, all in all, have a pretty positive opinion about men in general. And the point of this was saying that basically trying to disprove, this old trope of, oh, feminists just hate men. And apparently this was so important that all these people put a lot of time into debunking that myth that no, feminists basically have a pretty good opinion about guys. And I thought, okay. So I was having a bit of fun with this. I don't know, I was in a mood. And so I retweeted and I said, oh, so given that the attitudes of men and women, both feminists and those who are not, about men, both broadly positive and are broadly the same. Does this mean that feminism is now performative and largely irrelevant? No need to smash the patriarchy as it doesn't exist, or people are cool with it? And I got some responses. So let's see, I have to make this bigger so I can see it. Yeah. So the professor, Michael Flood, who's a professor of gender and something or other, gender and masculine, he's a focus on masculinity studies, gender studies, something like that. And I think he considers himself a feminist professor. He wrote back something like, no, no, patriarchy is that's not the point of the study. And patriarchy is very much a thing, and male domination and something like that. And so I was like, and so that I clarified, saying, well, my question is, I understand what people mean in general when they're saying patriarchy. And again, I was being very precise with him because he's a professor, and he says in his bio that he's, for evidence, he's quantitative, evidence-based type of gender studies dude. And so I thought, okay, let's get methodological here. And so my point about patriarchy was that in terms of research and theory, that to me, it doesn't have very much analytical value. So if you're trying to analyze, let's say like you're taking two different towns and there was one where there was we'll just use the grooming gang as an example. Okay, so there's certain towns where you have this grooming gang problem. There's certain towns that you don't. And if I wanted to explain, well, why is this happening in this town and not this? What analytical or theoretical value would patriarchy have in understanding that? Would you say, oh, well, there's a lot of patriarchy in Rochdale. That's why there's, or Pakistani men are just naturally more patriarchal than, and then what does that mean? And so I said to him, I said, well, concept's explanatory value depends on its definitional rigor. And if this is the state of the art, it's quite an indictment of feminism as an academic field. And I'm particularly focusing on academic feminism now, not, run the mill. I'm not after people who are involved in organizations or networks that are trying to, get men out of women's prisons or, focusing on girls' rights or anything like that. That's quite clear what that is. But so these definitions are circular. They don't have specificity, and they presuppose outcomes, and they carry a clear ideological bias. It's quite clear when feminists are talking about patriarchy. It's not a non-normative term. It's not just a descriptive term for way back in the day for communities or villages that were, all the leaders were men, and the descent of leadership went from, father to son or from man to man. And the property or of a patriarchal type of social system. And so you get this thing, if you ask them, what is patriarchy? Well, it's male domination. Well, then what's male domination? Well, it's patriarchy. It's a problem here. Then why not just say male domination? And so again, my point is that, this framing doesn't actually explain anything. It just restates the concept in different terms. And also, there's no causation here. So, for example, I'll use, the UK and the United States. Most politicians are men. But does this because of patriarchy? Because women can run for office. Women have run from office. Women have run one high office. So if patriarchy was meant to explain this difference, this disparity, then it also needs to be able to address these exceptions. Or because my point is that patriarchy, it's like, okay, if we say there it is, how do you account for the differences and the changes over time? If you're going to make it an explanatory or independent variable, it gets really problematic. And to me, you'd think that this would be, I just would expect, because I've been paying attention to feminism now for, I don't want to give away my age, but 25 years or so. And it seems to be just kind of, an arrested development where this term is concerned. So that's why I said, so you think by now, feminist scholars and researchers would have developed a definition that connects male dominance to specific historical, cultural, or economic mechanisms. A little shrug. And he gets back, and he tells me that my criticisms are misplaced, and that he was merely offering a simple definition of patriarchy, not identifying the explanatory mechanisms it points to. Did you look, for example, and then he always would do this. I'm not going to go through everything he showed me, but usually what he would respond to me would be like a syllabus or like a whole bunch of articles or something, with the presupposition that I just haven't read enough. I haven't done the reading. Which, fine. Which is a no-no. It's appealing to authority. So you would think that a professor, since this is his bread and butter, would be able to kind of right off the tip of his tongue, be able to, talk about these things. So did you look at, for example, Honeycutt's argument for the explanatory value of the concept? That's an example of operationalization. Well.
If he says so.
Yeah, and so I said, before I wrote back, I'd argue that the issue isn't just about offering simple definitions. It's that the definitions themselves are foundationally weak and circular. If patriarchy is defined as male domination, and male domination is explained as patriarchy, then the concept at its core is tautological, which is circular. Then the explanatory mechanisms you point to, like Honeycutt's operationalization, are doing all the heavy lifting. Why not start there then, instead of relying on this ideologically loaded concept? And I said, and then I tell him, because he doesn't know who he's talking to, because I don't have all my degrees and accolades in my bio. I'm just Tara.
That's where you're going wrong.
And I said, operationalizing a concept doesn't automatically validate its explanatory power. I don't want to get too much into this, but basically, operationalization is a technical term. So if I am having a study, so if I want to say for something like, if I want to say, well, and this is just it'd be a bad research question, but just as an example. So if I want to say that the reason why this town has a grooming gang problem and the other town doesn't is because this one town has a higher prevalence of patriarchy or a stronger patriarchal structure than the other. So my concepts then are, I have patriarchy as a concept. So if I want to measure the patriarchy in one town and the other, I have to operationalize that, which means I have to say, what's going to be an indication of patriarchy? Something that I can measure. Yeah. So that's what that's talking about, but it doesn't take away from the fact, I don't want to get too much in the weeds here, that your concept should be precise, especially if you're a social scientist and a researcher. But anyway, I was just, and so this went on. And then he finally was, what did he tell me? He said,
sorry, keep going. I'm just going to put this dog down.
Yeah.
Not put her down. Sorry.
So I don't put her down.
Yeah.
So after several goes arounds, when he just kept trying to, he tried to, it was kind of like, I would say kind of like walking the dog. Yeah. He was kind of taking me around, but he wasn't getting at the issue or addressing my question is like, does this as a concept, does patriarchy have, what analytical or theoretical value does it have when you're trying to understand, the core things of this, so sexism or rates of domestic violence or rape or whatever differences or inequalities or injustices that you want to attribute to sexism or I say because sexism to me is a stronger term. Then how is this useful? And he kept on wanting not to address that. And so I asked him, I said, why is your response to every critique a reading list or an appeal to authority? If the concept of patriarchy is robust and explanatory, as you suggest, it should stand up to scrutiny without needing endless references to validate it. Offering a syllabus instead of engaging directly is a deflection, especially when the criticisms being raised about the concept are about the concept's foundational assumptions, not someone's absence or reading or not,
Uh-huh.
And then he gets back, and then then he gets back. He's mad at me now. He's like, so this is why is he offering me reading lists? Because clearly, if I've done all the reading, I'd know. Because if you're making claims about how the concept of patriarchy is used in feminist scholarship, then actually reading some of that scholarship seems prudent and sensible step. And because I don't have time to run a one-on-one gender studies unit.
Oh my God, these men.
Anyway, so so this was funny. So I didn't put that back. So then I had to, then I'm going to throw out like, well, actually I have done the reading. And that's why I can say with confidence that 90% of it, and that might be being generous, of gender studies literature is landfill. I mean, it's just not, it's hard to say it's, increasing or expanding the knowledge. And but so, go ahead.
So, okay, because you're so mischievous dancing around these concepts, like, are you saying you don't believe in a patriarchy?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Well, so what I would say is that patriarchy doesn't exist the same way that I could say that God doesn't exist, but we created it. So my thing is that sexism, yeah, obviously there's sexism, there's disparities, there's all kinds of stuff, but say that patriarchy explains any of that, I don't think it does.
But you don't think that sexism is, that there's a system there?
But I wouldn't call it patriarchy.
Why not?
Well, yeah, but so the thing is that let me go through the thing, and that'll become clear. But because it's about why I think that patriarchy, in terms of there's this patriarchy, and it's about dominating women for the benefit of men. If that's the case, then we have to explain why. Then you'd be like, okay, well, how did this come to be? And it's not the same across time and space. Then what accounts for the changes? And is there something that accounts for the differences between men and women in different sectors other than patriarchy?
It's pretty the same. It's pretty the same. I mean, it differs hugely from culture to culture, but there are pretty central aspects of it that are universal.
Such as?
Well, everything.
So what would be, then that's good. What would be your definition of patriarchy?
Well, the system that upholds all the above, like the exploitation. Well, no, okay. So yeah, the brotherhood, the whatever you want to call it, where they close ranks to when their interests insofar as like what they get out of women are threatened. So
how do they do that?
By gender. Well, what gender is like all those concepts that are designed to keep you in place, that are enforced in various ways by different parts of society.
But let's see, we could use Scotland. So if we're going to say that how does patriarchy affect, we could use like the average woman in Scotland?
Well, I mean, okay, well, it affects your likelihood of earning above a certain amount. It affects how likely you are to own a house.
How does it do that though? So if let's say there's two of us, and there's one of us is a woman and one of us is a man, and
okay. Well, women are vulnerable to extra predation and exploitation on top of what men are vulnerable to. Typically, like obviously these are all generalizations, but because of being female.
But why is that patriarchy? That could be nature. We are different.
I don't think that is necessarily.
It's not patriarchy's fault that we're 30% weaker than men.
No, but the fact that there is a system that is designed to.
Hey, who designs the system?
Okay. Yeah, no. I know what you're getting at. I just. But there is a system. You can't deny that.
But where is it then? Who's deciding this? Where are the guys getting together to decide how to screw us?
I'm not saying they did. I'm not saying they did get together and decide it. Maybe this happens because of sex, but I think it's a bit of a cop-out to blame all of like the sexism that women experience on just nature. I think that there are other ways of doing society, and we're not animals. Well, maybe we are. Okay.
we have language and culture.
We're supposed to, you know, like if we were just going to do everything naturally, then we'd all be, you know, dying of infections and stuff, wouldn't we? So it's like,
how is patriarchy? How is the concept of patriarchy different from the concept of society?
Well, it's not. I mean, like we're talking about. I mean, it's like gender. Gender wasn't designed by anyone, but you can see that it's a thing, right?
But you called it a system, and a system implies a design or mechanisms of reproduction and establishment.
Does it? Can it not just happen and then continue to? I mean, it does serve a function, like the, you know, control of women's bodies.
See, this is what I'm pointing at. Hearing you talk about this, like hearing someone talk about God. And it's not just you, because some concepts are like that. Yeah. And so I want to make, if it's conversational, we're just having a conversation, it's one thing. But when it gets into people making theoretical and you get into research and whatnot, then it becomes like, well, what do you, if I wanted to go and compare patriarchy, the level of patriarchy in Scotland compared to the level of patriarchy in Wales, what would I look at? And how would I know that I'm measuring patriarchy rather than something else? This is a precision type of thing, because if we're just having a regular conversation and you bring up patriarchy, I have a general idea of what you're talking about. But to get it down to the nitty gritty, but this is good.
I don't think that the difference between, I don't think that the difference between a culture where, say, they have like, you know, divorce and or whatever, certain rights that benefit women or make life better for women on the whole, that's because they have less patriarchy or more patriarchy than another country.
Yeah, but I said, why do we even have this term?
The vulnerability that women, you know, that women are vulnerable because of their sex, and then I guess it's about how much you do to mitigate that as a society.
We could argue that patriarchy is one way of doing that.
Like a paternalistic, You're
women are vulnerable. That needs to be addressed. Then either you need, and we're vulnerable from men apparently. Well, yeah, because so either you need men to mitigate that or to be in agreement with that, or you need the state, which is oftentimes comprised of men.
Well, it's like how organized
you're going to defend your rights and your bodily autonomy when some dude decides to cross the line.
Yeah, I guess that, like, a less patriarchal society would be one in which the women are more organized for their interests, so that the effects of whatever, if it's a natural thing, you know, that the sex inequality are mitigated. So,
but the problem is we clear up, so we're not women on one side and men on the other. And also we produce them.
No, but it's not about, it's literally about protecting women. It's none of this is about having a go at men or challenging their interests. It's literally no more rape, no more murder, no financial, like, you know, abuse, like not having a place to stay, etc., which are things that women are more vulnerable to. So I think, I don't know, maybe it's an absence of a system more than a system.
Yeah. Let's see if this gets clear, because this is questions. I don't have, maybe patriarchy is a fantastic term and it's analytically and theoretically useful rather than just conversationally or, you know, kind of regular talk. But so I asked somebody, it's like, okay, so I asked somebody, what is, well, that was the lady who said that it was, what was it? What did she tell me? She was going to tell me what patriarchy is. Definitively, let's see. Oh yeah, it's patriarchy. So there's this thing called patriarchy, and it upholds sexist structures that continue to make things unequal. So of course, patriarchy can't be a person. It's a name for, like you would say, a system that upholds sex, I guess, that reproduces sexism or something, or doesn't mitigate it enough. So I asked her, okay, well, what is patriarchy, and how does it, like I asked you, how does it differ from society or political economy? In other words, you know, how is it? It seems, I guess my thing is, it seems ideological. It's definitely an idea, and definitely people believe in it or think that it actually exists outside of the concept. And Lola gets back that it prioritizes males over females. So patriarchy is something that prioritizes male over female. And then I asked her again, well, what is this it? What exactly comprises patriarchy? And if we say that it prioritizes male or female, this raises more questions than it answers. So many systems or practices prioritize one sex over the other. It could be biology, social, economic. And is this prioritization always negative? So what about patriarchy's emergence, its development, its divergence? Because it's not, doesn't play, I don't think we'd say it obviously doesn't play out the same, manifest the same way over time and space, or transformation into other forms of social organization. So what if we're not really what if it doesn't make much sense to call what we have now, like when the UK, a patriarchy, but we're locked into these old concepts, so it precludes us from noticing shifts. Which I'm not saying that there's, equality reigns, or there's no more sexism, or there's no more, important differences. So without addressing these dynamics, again, this concept becomes static and ahistorical and basically ideological. And it doesn't help us understand the relations between the sexes and how they interrelate with other structures. So the economy or the state, et cetera, is what I'm trying to push here. And so Lola gets back to me, and she tells me that patriarchy exists whether feminists talk about it or not. So it's like saying that God loves me even if I don't love him. I think it's less prominent.
Well, she's not. Is she wrong, though? I mean, if it's not a system, why does it feel so much like one? Like, why is it you come up against
Why are people so convinced that there's a God if there isn't one? I mean, maybe there is. So again, if what this is becoming, if I put my empirical hat on, is the patriarchy becomes unfalsifiable. You can't falsify it. You can't, it just is.
Even if they close ranks, they do. They close ranks across class, across race.
But only men, women don't. I mean, so you say they close ranks, okay?
On issues,
but I want to know. But no, if so, give me an example of how men. So it's men then. Men are doing this, right? Men close ranks, and they do this because of something called patriarchy. Or they're allowed to do this because they have this patriarchal.
I think they act frequently as a class.
Give me an example of when men have acted as recently as a class that would say, okay, that's, you can point to it like that's some patriarchy there. Yeah, they're only able to do that because of this thing called patriarchy, this whatever culture, system, something.
Well, the grooming stuff that we were talking about, like, okay, maybe I mean, what is it that threatens them so much about the idea of female-only organizing? Why do they get so threatened at the idea of like women's groups in their organizations?
Who exactly?
All of them.
Well, all men are threatened by women's groups.
Okay, no, but okay, in my experience,
that may be the case. I'm not saying.
Sorry,
I'm
yeah,
just saying that
obviously, like I can only speak from my own experience. Maybe men don't act like this except around me.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that how does patriarchy? It seems like this is kind of a catch-all. That's patriarchy. It's like, which is fine, but it doesn't. How does that explain?
I think the problem is otherwise you're left having to explain everything by class, and that falls short of explaining the kind of barriers that women have thrown up all the time. Like,
But how do you then understand? Okay, that's I'm not saying there's differences. What I'm saying is that, yeah, I just I find it increasingly problematic. But well, that's just that just could be my thing. But if you want to say, well, to use it as a catch-all, well, this is because of patriarchy, or whatever the issue is.
What is sexism then? What's sexism, Tyler? What is sexism? It's like
sexism is just like race. Just like race, you have a it's basically there's a hierarchy, and that it's a false hierarchy. Yeah. So that you could say, okay, sexism is you could have where there's a hierarchy, and men in general are placed above women in general, and that's a false hierarchy because
there isn't a system that enables that. There isn't like a kind of mechanics to all of that.
But then why does it? Okay, but then it's natural, not social. Because if you have rules, if you have rules, for example, like when women didn't own property, so a place where when you have when private property becomes dominant, you have that would be that was one of the things that men could own property, but women couldn't, or men could have credit cards, and for a long time women couldn't. So obviously you could look at that and be like, well, that's sexist, that's ridiculous. Why? And there'd be the rationale that that distinction, and people pushed back on that rightly. Women pushed back on that rightly, and that became like, yeah, that's it's not sustainable. So, or it's not right, and they pushed back against that. So when you have all these things that get whittled away, then it becomes so then in that case would be like, well, can you say right now that if you have a legal system in the UK, for example, or where under the law you have equality under the law, you have a culture that at least officially is saying, yes, sexism is bad, racism used to be bad, etc. Then it becomes like, well, then this thing that we would call patriarchy or sexism, so a hierarchy between a false hierarchy, that's based on ideology or sex stereotypes or whatever it is, then that makes more sense to me. That you can have sexism, and that can go up and down, and can be you can correlate that with other things. But this idea that there's a patriarchy that is somehow
have a hierarchy? Sorry.
Go ahead.
How do you have a hierarchy without a system, though? That's I don't. Surely there has to be a.
No, yeah, but I'm not saying there's not. What I'm saying is that to call that patriarchy.
Because patriarchy says it benefits men. Because patriarchy means that it benefits men. Is that why?
Is that what? Well, I don't know. I'm asking. It's
patriarchy. Why would you not call that patriarchy? Why is that not patriarchy?
I would call that society there's societies that have more or less sexism, more or less racism, more or less xenophobia, more or less inequalities that have various rationales, whether they be sex or race or religion or whatever. Also, there's also rationalized class differences as that these go in together. But again, I'm not saying that there was that this term.
But how do you? But the problem there is, and then maybe it's just how what the connotations the words have for me or whatever. But if you call it sexism, so if you apply that to like trying to organize women, and let's say like the example of trying to set up a women's group within an organization, but you're not basing that on the idea that there's a patriarchy and that there's a need to kind of like work, and look at that critically or whatever with other women that are affected by it. If you're calling that an anti-sexist group, a group of women to combat sexism within the organization, it's like it almost sounds like you're making it an issue of sexist men and then men are either sexist or they're not, and then you can put men on a spectrum of sexist to non-sexist, and that's the problem, is like if you have the men that are too far along that way, then the men are too sexist, rather than
how's that different than saying they're too patriarchal?
Theory which says that they are, because they are men, they are in this class of people that have largely the same interests as you, but on sex relations, not. And they have shared interests with each other, and they are not going to be amenable to you, pursuing your own, because they are.
Okay, but what does this have to do with How does this have? Why is patriarchy important for getting at what you're talking about?
Because you're applying a theory to it. You're not saying, oh, there are some bad men. You're saying that all men and all women are members of these sex classes, and that in order to be able to deal with that and go forward, women need to be able to organize separately. But when you start kind of saying, oh, but you can have men that are feminists, not all men are sexists after all, that's at the point at which women only organizing becomes impossible, and thus feminism is impossible.
Yeah, I don't understand that.
No.
No, because if you have an institution or a policy or a norm that you find that you find is sexist, and you want to address that, then it makes sense you would have collective action to do that. And yeah, you could have that could be you're going to have men would get on board, because what I would say is that if men
I'm not saying never involve men in women's rights stuff. Obviously.
No, but what I'm saying is that if we have a patriarchy, then the only reason why women have any rights at all is because men have acquiesced to that. They have to agree to it, because if they don't, then we're really screwed. If enough men decide that this feminism, this equality, yeah, we tried that, it's not really working for us, and they decide not to go along with it anymore, not to recognize the fact that we should have equal rights, what would women do?
Well, no, that's not
what would women do?
Well, no, because you can affect.
No, but let's take this to the extreme. But this is important, I think. Let's take it to the extreme. So there's this patriarchy, okay, and so if they really decide to rev it up because it's in their interest to, and they will close ranks, why don't they do it more then? Why do they entertain us the way they do?
Do they?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I don't know. Maybe I've been on a different left to you.
No, but what I'm saying is that women's rights. Who in the last instance, who protects our rights? Us.
Yeah. Generally, women. I think that's one of the things that I've learned most in this whole fight, is when all of these services and all of these legislation that has been passed, etc. It's all been as a result of women. A lot of the time, they are either directly affected by something, or who set up some project to try to help women who were. It's all gains that were made by women that are So yeah, no, I think it's collective action, and that you need certain conditions in order for that to be able to take place. So, for example, to not be starving and getting bombed in a tent, etc. But yeah, like it's collective action on the part of women, and women only action, and that's why they have more success with
Okay, but when you're petitioning that, so if we have rights, we have legal rights, yeah, that are right,
frequently unenforced, but yeah.
Okay, so my question is then, if there's this patriarchy, why isn't there more of it?
It's everywhere. What are you talking about?
If it's everywhere, it's everywhere and it's nowhere.
There's like
it's everywhere and it's everywhere and it's nowhere.
I feel like this is a semantic discussion. I think that you've drawn me into.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Let's it's cool. No, okay, let's see. Let's go on a bit. Let's see if there's anything interesting here. Oh yeah, Covered in Prawn says patriarchy is not equal to men and it hurts men and boys too. Okay.
Yeah, poor men.
So this could be, so let's see. Then we have another one too that I thought was interesting. Yeah, so this person told me the patriarchy is a system, not a person. You would agree with that. We aren't saying men are all right. They clearly aren't, but they are grown adults and able to take responsibility and fix things. Okay. So I would say this comment highlights a common contradiction in feminist discourse. So on the one hand, she says patriarchy is a system, not a person, but then holds individual men responsible for fixing it. So if patriarchy is systemic, it can't be dismantled solely through individual actions. Structural change is necessary. Saying men aren't all right further conflates men as individuals with patriarchy as a system, undermining the distinction that she made. So I think this kind of conflation reduces structural critique to kind of moralizing about what men should and shouldn't do, or what's good or bad behavior. So it's, again, is it a structure? So if patriarchy is a structure, so it's a system, and the purpose of this system is to maintain this hierarchy, sexist hierarchy between women and men, presumably for the aggregate benefit of men.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it is for the aggregate benefit of men. I think that's kind of the whole thing of like, men can't really be feminists. I mean, like, I don't care if a guy calls himself a feminist. I know what they mean, so I'm like, yeah, good. But you know, all women can
so
say.
then I would, that could be specific, like, how does the average man, so if I have somebody like, let's say, I'll just use her for example, she's in my mind, Hillary Clinton, and you have my son. How is the patriarchy, what kind of patriarchal privilege does he have, except for the fact that, of course, he's stronger than her?
Physically. Well, yeah, but I mean, same Obama, Obama was president, so racism doesn't exist. There isn't a system of.
No, what I want to say is that are there shares? Like, is it similar to like white privilege? Like all of us white people,
yeah,
there's a system of white privilege, and all of us are I kind of have this like this white share or something. Is it similar with men? They have this kind of patriarchal, I don't know, pass or card or something. And how does that work?
I mean, I don't, without completely understanding the distinction between a sexist hierarchy and patriarchy, I find it difficult to answer that question, because just in all of the ways that women are
well, but it's also a problem, because if I were to look at my thing, like this thing is that you have now, where you look at most of the professions, and you look at a lot of things where, if we go back 100 years or less than that, there was very few women present, but now there can be, in some places, they're not just women haven't made inroads, but they can be the majority in certain professions. So I want to know is, what is it that patriarchy locks women out of as a group in the UK that seems unreasonable? What does patriarchy keep me from doing?
When you mean sexism or gender or like the system, do you know what
I'm just trying to understand how if there's this patriarchy and it's an encompassing system, then it could be that I'm just so used to it that it's like water that I don't know, I'm not looking like, oh, that's patriarchy. That there it is. And just in terms of the, we can say there's differences between the sexes, there's sexism, there's various things, but to try to use, to say, well, that's because there's patriarchy. I just find that kind of ideological. I just don't find it very, very useful. We can say, okay, there's certain institutions, there can be a firm, there can be the state, there can be an agency, there could be even the family or whatever, that things have gotten that we could say there's sexism, there's discrimination, there's blind spots, but
you don't think that they
attribute that to an overall patriarchy, I think doesn't make sense to me anymore.
You don't think that men recognize that they have a shared interest and have kind of organized to an extent on that basis?
No.
Really?
Not now. Yeah. Where are men intentionally getting together to be like, listen, guys, these women we have to put them in their place, or we have to gain backgrounds, or there's too much whatever. So how are we going to organize as men under the identity of men to like retain our privilege against these encroaching women?
I think a lot of men spend their entire lives pondering that question.
But as a group,
a lot of them online currently, like gaining massive followings for trying to like fix society by putting women back in their place, like because patriarchy obviously ruined the patriarchy theory ruined society. Apparently, gave us all this LGBTQI nonsense, and made men lonely.
Yeah, but so how do we separate patriarchy from men? Because I can listen to what Andrew Tate and some of these guys saying, be like, okay, that guy's he's being an asshole, he's being he's putting on a performance, he's trying to be I'd be like, yeah, but
I think it's what they can get away with at the end of the day, right? All this is like, I know we're all always going to come back to the class thing, like we're probably getting at with the Clinton, like, who's on top in that arrangement, obviously, like these things intersect in the most dominant thing, but it doesn't go all the way to explaining everybody's, position within all the dynamics. Sorry, I've lost.
It's okay. It's okay.
Oh, the patriarchy.
Yeah, so I'll get to this, and then we'll have to wrap up, because I can't get. I'll have to save the how it's the sublime object of feminism. So my thesis, and this is just a thesis, I don't know, is that feminism as we know it requires the concept of patriarchy to justify itself. This codependency explains why so much of the reasoning and research around it feels sloppy or circular. If patriarchy is a foundational organizing principle of feminism, then feminism can't exist without it. It's not just a theoretical tool, it's the core justification for the movement. So without patriarchy, feminism would need completely to rethink its purposes, methods, or goals. So this dependency explains why critiques of patriarchy as a concept often hit a wall of defensiveness or are dismissed outright. If the concept is seen as indispensable, there's little incentive to interrogate its analytical weaknesses or explore alternatives. But there are plenty of incentives to defend and prop it up, no matter the logical gymnastics or ideological rigidity required. Notice how the more vague and flexible the definition of patriarchy, the harder it is to critique it. Is it a system? Is it a structure? Is it a cultural norm? Is it a historical legacy? Or is it just shorthand for male dominance? I'm almost finished. When it can mean everything, it can't be refuted, but that's not a strength. It's a sign that the concept is more ideological than analytical. So that in terms of it being useful to explain things or to resolve them. In other words, the sloppy science and circular logic surrounding patriarchy isn't accidental. It's baked into the structure of a concept that feminists can't face letting go of. This dependency, I'd argue, holds feminism back from adopting more rigorous, forward-thinking approaches to understand and addressing the relations between the sexes. But it's just, that's my thing, is that I find it very fuzzy, which is fine for conversation or for whatever, but when it comes to trying to analyze the things that most of the issues that feminists are concerned about, like practical things, I just find it, I don't find it particularly useful, but yet people don't want, obviously people are very attached to it, and they could be right and I could certainly be wrong. But I find it interesting that it's one of those things that if you touch upon it, it's like challenging somebody's religious faith or something. They get very, they look at you like, you're like, what? Of course there's patriarchy. And it's like, okay.
Well, but in terms of, the problem is, Sarah, so, okay, the theory, so like applying class as like your main kind of basis for, you know, like what you're basing your stuff, your action on, makes sense, because like all of this vulnerability that women experience, like, is all, you know, basically if they're vulnerable to the exploitation is going to happen. So if you remove the conditions that make them vulnerable, then that, you know, makes them more able, well, it defends them, gives them rights, and then later on down the line makes them less likely to put up with men's shit. So society becomes, you know, more progressive in its outlooks. But the problem is that to get there, you have to organize together. And there are real
organizes around. I've never organized around patriarchy.
No, I'm saying that in order to organize around class issues, you need to be able to work together, and the sexism becomes a huge obstacle to working together. At which point you then need sometimes women-only space to organize in. And
of course, I'm not saying I'm not. My thing about retiring patriarchy in terms of like a you know, as a, again, is that it,
I know, but it's how it
has nothing to do with. I'm not saying that women aren't that there's no reason for women to organize.
But you don't.
On that.
But why would you think that there was, unless you recognize that there was a sex class thing going on?
Yeah, but I don't see why there's women and there's men, and they're different. There's a difference, and it makes sense that, you know, that women's interests and men's interests aren't always going to be aligned, and can, in certain, you know, if we get down to particulars, could be in conflict, or there could be a variety of things. I'm not saying that's not the case. I just don't see why you say that that's because of patriarchy. There's women and men because there's women and men. And if we got rid of patriarchy,
maybe I'm really not grasping it.
There would still be, you know, it's just yeah. There aren't two sex classes or two type. There's not two because of patriarchy. You could argue that, yeah. I mean, again, I just find it, if there is this thing called patriarchy, then we have to be able to explain it. Where did it come from? How does it get reproduced? And why is it variable? And that could be, and you could, you know, that's fine. But then it becomes, you know, I think that's a more interesting question. But to say that there's that, for example, the women in the shelters, that you're trying to fight to get women single sex homeless shelters or emergency housing, and to say the reason why, I would wonder if it would make sense, like, well, one of the reasons why that's so difficult is because of patriarchy. I mean,
yeah, I would. Like, the core issue is the housing crisis, but all along the way, it's a system that they come up against, and it's not conscious.
If there's a system,
but at every
and you want
point,
to call it patriarchy, not capitalism. Or
no,
not,
because it's not just because that's the problem. Like, I think that analysis leaves out like all the sexism, and like makes it kind of like a side issue, or like an unfortunate, you know, additional thing that you get sometimes, rather than something that's actually baked into it. And that capitalism doesn't go all the way to explaining. Like, without the housing crisis, none of that would be happening. So it would be fine. But when it comes to, like, for example, women going to services, even the best men that work in those services don't understand the needs of those women.
That's because they're men. Is that not because that's not because of patriarchy, is it?
Yeah, I think it's a semantic thing. I'm really gonna have to go away and get my head around this. I think
that's okay. It's okay. Yeah, and I'm not. Yeah,
it's an academic thing.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
no, but if we want to understand, male domination or sexism, or if we want to, so that it's something that can actually be measurable, that's not just ethereal and just kind of more ideological, then to me, it's like, to bring in the Marxism point of it, as at least a theory that if you want to understand how relationships between the sexes change over time, then if you look, the old canard of the forces and relations of production don't explain everything, but they do explain quite a bit.
yeah,
In terms of changes over time. But yeah, it's not, and that, of course, if we go back and be like, okay, how are you going to organize social reproduction, 5,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago, up through the line, then there's differences between the sexes and how those there's like the unchanging ones and then the changing ones that are more social and politically induced. So again, I just, in my particular instance, I just find patriarchy to just raise more questions than it answers. But I'm certainly not saying that there isn't sexism or misogyny, or that women aren't a sex class, that you can't, that it's not highly problematic to take the male as the norm. I mean, I'm not disputing any of that, or that or bad behavior or whatnot. I would just think that, I just find it, we can leave it at that. And I appreciate the pushback. It's good. Because I've just been thinking about this. I just noticed that whenever you try to patriarchy, people get very much like, and I'm like, what? I'm just asking. I just,
I'm surprised.
What does it explain? Actually. I don't think it explains anything.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, I mean
it kind of, it could be a beginning. But yeah. Thank you, Laura. Anything you want to say about anything before we retire?
No, you've completely fried my brain.
I'm sorry. Well, thank you for being my interlocutor.
Thank you.
No, this is just a question. I just find it it's an ongoing thing, though. I just think that it'd be interesting to think about
It's just interesting to me that you spent last week telling these women that they need to think of everything as a system, and now you're like, but not that. That's not a system.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that it doesn't make sense to call it patriarchy to me.
Yeah. And I think
and I'm not saying like never ever did that make sense, but now if I want to understand what's going on in the UK or America or United States, if I think that I'm gonna think of that in terms of patriarchy is useful, I just don't. And if you want, then again, it's like, okay, so there's this system. How does it work? What are its mechanisms? How is this actually achieved and reproduced?
Mm-hmm.
And you could and just say, well, there's male domination, or it's because it's patriarchy, and it just gets kind of not very analytical, I would say.
Yeah.
But
I won't use that word around you anymore.
No. See, people get defensive, yeah. So I want you to think about why patriarchy, why that term, why that belief is so important to you.
I'm gonna go and have a little cry.
No. Smash the patriarchy.
Clutching my Simone de Beauvoir.
Who also, she had a very good, she was quite not oppressed. She was upper class and had a fairly modern family and was having a good, I mean, not that she never had it, maybe she was harassed on the street. We'd be hard pressed to see how she was constrained by patriarchy even way back then. But there wasn't people that weren't.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But these,
look at us, we're machines. We're machines, Laura. We've talked to a draw, which is good. Okay. All right, everyone, we're going to turn in. Thank you for tuning in, and let me know what you think, and do like, subscribe, follow, etc. And this will be to be continued. Patriarchy. And I will also, I won't subject Laura to it. I'll find somebody else when I go through part 2 about why I think feminists are so, some feminists are so attached to patriarchy. Anyway, good night, Laura.
Good night. Thank you,
Bye.
Tara.
Bye. All right, so need to go get the kids off to bed. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will see you next time on Morbid Symptoms. Thank you.